Do we have any apologies?
No, Convener, there are no apologies.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, we will go into our first item, which is the care and support at home and care and supported services, and it's a report from it's been through the IGIB and has come to the council, and I think it's Martin Tom that's going to take this item.
Thank you, Convener. This report really is here for, it's a prior consideration report. As you said, the report has been through the IGIB process and it was approved there on Friday. The report really sets out the strategy for a contract for care at home services and supported services going forward. You may recall that just over a year ago, we took the decision to use the Scotland Excel framework for a period of 12 months to allow us an opportunity to look to develop a Falkirk-specific framework which would align with the future model for our in-house care at home services. So the framework strategy really sets out our plans for the future provision of care at home services from the independent sector and to work alongside our in-house services when they shift to the new model. Members may recall that our new model for the in-house service will focus on reablement, urgent response services with an element of maintenance provision, supported by a much bigger element of maintenance provision through the private sector. The big changes for the framework that we are progressing with relate to a change in terms of the number of lots. The current framework has about 7 lots in it, with lots of specialist areas within those lots. For example, there's a specific law for alcohol and drug service provision, specific lots for mental health service provision. And actually, when we looked at the specialist provision, it was very clear that actually we had providers who were asking for more money because they were providing a specialist service. But actually, when we looked for the qualification to support that specialist provision, there wasn't any there really. So the framework, in terms of the future framework, actually we're recommending 2 lots, one for care at home provision, which is that, I suppose, the provision that would be supplied through the free personal care arrangements, and the other through supported services. The supported services lot will focus on community integrated services, really. It will be those services that support people to remain independent, as opposed to those direct personal care services. The other recommendations that we took forward through the user intelligence group were setting a cap in terms of the rate that we pay. In terms of setting that cap, we were doing some work around looking at the new living wage, looking at the impact of inflation. We've looked nationally at the cost of care across the country, and we're setting a capped rate based on, I guess, that whole amalgamation of information. Can't say what the capped rate is today, but we are working that through to include within the framework. For me, the benefit of that capped rate is it will allow us really to focus on quality. So you will probably have noticed in the report that actually in terms of the allocation of work, in terms of the weighting, we've identified about 90% based on quality and only 10% based on cost. The current framework that we use is something like 60% on price and 40% on quality. So if you're a cheap provider, chances are you would get the package of care allocated to you before somebody that cost us more, whether or not you actually provided a better quality of service. The fact that going forward we are proposing to use 90% quality rating, which would be allocated to those providers who have care inspector at grading 6, which identifies them as sector leading, they would get 90% initially. Where we have a provider with a care inspector grade of 5, which is very good, they would get 72% of that rating. And where we have a provider that has a grading of 4, they would get 40%. So the driver there really for getting work as a priority would be to have a grade of 6. because if you're a grade of 6 in terms of your care quality rating, you would get 90% off, I guess, the total rating. Even if you were a much cheaper provider, you would still have 90% in terms of that points award. So for me, the real focus should be on quality. The framework really supports that drive. We have discussed with providers around how can they achieve that quality. And a lot of them have actually been really keen to work with us to look at how can we improve quality and training across the sector. There's been some discussion around looking to develop an academy approach. I have to say that's been more popular with some of the smaller providers to work with us to look to how they can drive up their quality. Some of the larger, more national providers have their own training, learning, development teams. But again, for me, the real driver to get work from Falkirk will be show us that actually you have really good quality. So that's one of the key shifts for us, that alongside the 2 lock provision. I hope that you've had a chance to read the report. I'm joined by Liz Beattie, who is the project manager, who's done a lot of work around this. And I'm also joined by James King from procurement, who's given us a lot of advice and supported the user intelligence group over the last few months. Really happy to take any questions, but as I said, this report has been agreed by the IGIB, who recognise that actually that real shift to focus on quality rather than cost was actually a real benefit for us, and it would hopefully see much improved outcomes for our service users. I have to say the report has to be seen in conjunction with the future model for our care at home services, because that future model will ensure that that quality care is provided well after the point where we've commissioned the service. Our plans are to build a quality assurance process within the in-house service that actually will monitor and regularly review and support the external care at home providers, so that it's not a case of we allocate work to them and then forget about it, but actually we carry on working with them throughout the provision of that care to make sure it's still meeting the person's needs and achieving their outcomes. And that's why throughout the strategy, actually, we're really keen to highlight that expectation around collaborative working going forward as well. So hopefully you'll see that as a key benefit, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Martin. It's good to hear the strategy going forward. I'm really pleased to hear that we're looking at that quality aspect and giving that a much greater weighting. And I'm sure that will help to give a bit of assurance to our service users as well, and that they are getting the best quality care. But what is really heartening, and I know through the discussions I had recently with Stirling University, is that academy approach and a real opportunity for local service providers to be able to upskill in order to be able to attract the contracts, but also the fact that they will then be able to get paid at that higher rate because they're able to demonstrate the skills that are being used within people's homes and care settings on a regular basis. So I'm really pleased to see the strategy going forward, and I really do hope that will encourage more service providers to do that upskilling in order that we can be able to build the sector. We know that there's been real deficits around workforce, particularly as we've come out of COVID and having lost many. So I thank you for that. And I'm here and doing this on behalf of the portfolio holder who can't be with us today, but I'm happy to move the report as from the council's perspective, recognising that it sits with the IGIB and it's already been through their processes. Okay, Councillor Garner.
Happy second.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Spears, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tom, for your presentation. I have been approached by some private care providers showing concern about how you choose which companies to use. and that new companies can spring up and suddenly be taken on when established companies that are proven to provide a quality service are overlooked. Can you tell me the process that's involved and then how you choose the companies that the Falkirk Council use?
Yes, I'll maybe ask James King to come in around kind of discussion around the future kind of model in terms of the allocation. I have to say there have been some challenges recently. You're probably aware that we've had significant workload pressures, and we have been really struggling to provide care and support up until probably a couple of months ago. Probably just over 12 months ago, when the old Falkirk framework expired, we moved to Scotland Excel, and we had hoped that Scotland Excel would have opened up their framework to allow those providers that worked in Falkirk who weren't on that framework. We hoped that they would open it up at that time to allow them to provide services through the Scotland Excel framework. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So given the capacity issues, we had to engage with a number of providers that weren't on Scotland Excel framework and give them short-term agreements, which have lasted probably for the last 12 months. So part of the issue really was we didn't have capacity and had to engage with new providers to build that capacity. So that's kind of the current situation where we're at now. Going forward, when we go out to tender for this contract, providers will have to submit applications to get onto the framework, and those applications will then be scored against that quality framework. The report kind of highlights that our expectation is that nobody will come onto the framework with a grade lower than 4. If we have existing providers who do have grades lower than 4, then we will work with them to make sure that they improve that quality of care. As I said, going forward, our real priority for commissioning will be quality. So where we have a provider who has a quality rating of 6 and another provider who has a quality rating of 4, by default, the provider with a quality rating of 6 would get that package of care if they're able to take it and they apply to take that package of care. So it will be the higher quality graded provider that will get first choice in terms of packages of care going forward. The lower the level of quality, the lower points you would get in that weighting system. And so you would drop down in terms of the priority for allocation of work. The process for applying for work, really, we're still working through. However, the current process is we go out to all providers and ask if they have capacity and if they're willing to take a package of care. And then in the current model, it would be ranked against price and quality. Going forward, as I said, it would be ranked against quality. So where we have 2 providers applying within the same area, the allocation would go to the one with the highest quality provision. Where we had 2 providers with the same quality provision, it would depend on which one had capacity and which one came back to us saying they could take it first. Hopefully that answers the question. I'm not sure if there's anything that James King would want to add to that, but hopefully that's made it clear.
Well, it partially answers the question, but I've got to obviously not been involved. I have asked to visit you, but that offer's never been taken up. The word on the street is not quite how you're describing. I'd spend a lot of time with senior citizens, usually delivering food parcels, etc. And there's a great concern about the quality, about people that are only in for 10 minutes and away. And you know, the service we're actually providing does not ring of quality. But the concern amongst the providers, the businesses that provide, is how you choose your provider, and they want it to be more transparent.
And I actually think that what Mr. Tom has said is, yes, he agrees with their quality, and yes, they are making it far more transparent about how they choose their providers, and that's what their strategy is designed to do. James, you want to say anything further?
Not, to be honest, I think you've already covered that. It's really the processes around the ranking of the providers based on their quality and price evaluation. So the work that would be awarded according to that ranking. So with the quality going forward, the quality weighting is such of 90% that automatically is going to be the kind of decide one of the main factors around the ranking. And then it'd be, the provider meet all the needs of the supported person, and their care inspectorate grading. So it's the quality that's the predominant factor, and it is on a ranking basis. So it's not that new providers come on and they get automatically new work. It does go through a process, and that ranking process for the award of work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions, and I think, Martin, you maybe answered part of my first question already. Prior to the Scotland Excel framework being taken on, we had 14 providers locally, and I think that was done under the light touch regime according to the report. I might be wrong there, but you can keep me right. It's good that we're keeping the continuity going, we're keeping these 14 providers, but I'm just wondering at the moment, do we have enough within our local area to provide the care that we need? And what impact do you really see the Scotland Excel framework having? Because it seems to be a drawn out process.
Martin.
I have to say, this framework will pull us away from using Scotland Excel. We used Scotland Excel through the period where our old contract expired. Our old contract ended right in the middle of the Omicron variant impact on, I guess, services and all of us. And at the same time, we saw the start of the financial crisis. And rather than develop a Falkirk framework at that really uncertain time, the IHIB made the decision that we would defer for a period until there was a bit more stability. The 14 providers that are kind of mentioned, highlighted there in terms of the light touch regime, they were Falkirk providers that weren't on Scotland Excel, so we had to enter into agreements with them. I think there was, I can't remember the number, I think there was maybe 34 or more providers that were on Scotland Excel. So across Falkirk, we actually have around about 50 providers. And James might know the exact number, but it is quite a big pool of providers that we have. Our hope is that with this new framework, all those providers will submit bids to be part of that framework, because one of the things that was really clear through the engagement with our service users is they really value continuity of care, and we hope that that will continue in the new framework. Hopefully that answers the question. I'm not sure if James, on the top of your head, you can tell the exact number of providers currently in Falkirk, but the 14 were those that were excluded from Scotland Excel.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Martin. That takes me on to my second question, and it's just over the page in the report at 4.2. People receiving support. There seems to be an online survey conducted, and they offer a face-to-face consultation events as well. If people don't have access online or weren't able to attend a face-to-face consultation event, what other ways were you using to get feedback?
I'll maybe ask Liz to come in on this one, because Liz actually led that part of work for us.
Morning, Liz.
Hi there. The Carer Centre in Falkirk led a bit of that work for us, so it was in person. But we also have surveys as well that were printed and also used online for both the consultation as well. So, and we plan to use the new Participation Plus, which will allow us to carry out a survey very shortly again, because we want to continue with the consultation as we move through building the new service and the contract to make sure that they go hand in hand. And that we will use our care sector to take them out to the people in person in their homes. That's the way that we're going to do it. And we've done it in the past.
Okay, thanks for the answers. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Liz.
Okay, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. Obviously, very, very pleased that we're making quality of paramount importance in this new approach. But a couple of questions I just wanted to ask. First of all, since quality is going to be the number one criteria, how do you ensure that we're not going to have escalating costs? Because there's obviously a danger if you make quality number one, that will happen. The second issue I think you've partly covered, but it's maybe you could just say a bit more about how far this new arrangement is expected to increase our capacity, because you've made reference to the issue of our difficulties in fulfilling the demands. So how far do you think that's going to help with that?
I'll pick up the cost point first. The fact that we're setting a cap in terms of the hourly rate means that our costs can't really increase, and that cap will be the maximum that we will pay for an hour of care. As I said, the main driver around the quality element is that if you are a top quality provider, you would get priority in terms of allocation of work. So we anticipate that most people are going to put in bids round about what that cap rate is, which is why we've made the cost or the price element so low in terms of the weighting. It is really going to be driven by quality. I guess I'll go back to, if we have a provider that grade 6 in the care inspectorate, they'll get 90% in terms of quality. Even if we had a much cheaper provider with 5 in terms of their care inspectorate grading, the most they could get would be 82%. So they would never actually get work above a top quality provider. So the real incentive to drive up quality is going to be the priority in terms of allocation of work, because we don't anticipate any real variation in terms of the costs. We expect most providers to come in round about the cap. As I said, that cap's been based on work looking nationally at what is paid for care, and taking into account the increase to the living wage and the impact of inflation. So we think it's an affordable amount, that cap, and we think that people should be able to deliver fair work practices by charging us that amount, and actually that they'll still be able to make a profit, because after all they are private businesses. So we don't anticipate any increase in terms of the costs. In terms of the second point, actually, could you just repeat the question? Sorry.
As I say, you partly covered it earlier, but it's about in how far is it likely that this new arrangement, how confident are you that this new arrangement will increase the capacity, given that we know that there's been a problem in us being able to deliver the service that's demanded? Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, that's why it's so important that we see this in the context of the new model for the in-house service. The new model for the in-house service is really focusing on outcomes for people. The fact that we are moving to a very, I guess, a re-ablement model with the in-house service, which should see people reach their maximum level of independence. The fact that we plan to continue to work with providers over the duration of their provision, that actually should enable us to ensure that people's outcomes are being met. It should enable us to review that provision, and that in itself should give us some additional capacity. We have seen, I think, Councillor Spear's question around that that allocation of work from new providers. We have seen an increase in capacity over recent months. You may recall, probably over a year ago, we had something like 200 plus people waiting for a package of care. That's no longer the position today. We have seen capacity increase in the external market. The quality assurance bit and the collaboration bit that we are trying to drive forward through this new framework will actually ensure that we maximise that capacity. I've got no doubt, though, however, that we need to continue to work with providers to grow that capacity to meet the demand that's coming forward. You'll know about the demographic challenges that we foresee over the next 10, 20 years. There is going to be a growing demand in our services, which is why it's so important that the in-house service focuses on making sure that we get people to a state of maximum independence and then support them to maintain that. Which really is why another element of the framework focuses so much on that collaborative working. We need to operate as a whole system, not just independent providers and the council services, but actually as one system, which we are really hopeful this new framework will push forward. Hopefully that answers the question, Councillor Hannon.
Very thoroughly. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr. Sorry, Bailey Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Obviously, the service isn't going to decrease over the years. It's going to increase, and the pressures on your team is going to increase going forward as people are living longer. I like the bit regarding the academy, and I think it's been mentioned before. It was maybe when you brought the last report a year ago, Martin, and I think it's important that we try and advertise. There's one of the big cities I've got on the TV advertising for carers, and do we, the leader the council mentioned about universities, do we engage with the local college? Do we go into schools for career fairs? And how do we advertise? Is it locally or do we do it nationally? As I think it was Councillor Parks mentioned yesterday about if you pay more, there's more chance of you getting people to come and work. And it doesn't matter what trade the council are looking for, there's always somebody in the area paying more. And people will go to the people who's paying more rather than being a good company.
Okay, Councillor Kerr, I think we've got Patricia's got her hand up and may want to answer that one.
Thank you, Convener. In terms of recruitment, we've been doing a number of different things, specific recruitment fairs in the college and more widely in the community. We're also, along with the chief executives of the council and the health board, engaging in a partnership with the college and the university. And we had a meeting last week about that very subject of tying into the senior years in school and offering training, offering employment during school holidays, for example, for young people who are interested in that or who are interested in going into a broader health or social care career. So there's a number of things that we're doing to try and promote employment, to become the employer of choice, but also to support our providers to attract and retain staff. So we've already done some work jointly with them and really looking at that academy as a joint investment to spread the cost of training. As you'd expect, there is ongoing training. There's a level of accreditation that's required for people to get their SVQ level for employment at certain grades. In terms of the remuneration, we're tied into the council in terms of the grading of staff, and that's linked to other work opportunities that there are within the council in terms of equality of pay. There's also the discussions around the national living wage as well, which we require the providers to reach, as well as our own staff. So there are a number of initiatives, but more broadly, the local challenges we have are echoed across Scotland, and it is it was perhaps became clearer during COVID. There's an issue around parity of esteem. You know, initially we clapped for NHS staff, not for social care staff. That changed, but we do still have a challenge of really a value of what social care employment, but also what our staff offer and bring into our communities in terms of the preventative work and the support that goes on within our communities through the provision of social care. So we're contributing to those discussions. I've just been on a call with the Minister for Mental Health and Wellbeing, and we touched on that very subject. It is a challenge and one which we will rise to along with our colleagues, but these are really critical jobs in our community. They're really valuable jobs in our community, and we need to really promote them as such so that we can sustain support in our communities for those who are our most vulnerable citizens. So thank you for the question, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Patricia. And just my last comment, I think Councillor Spears mentioned it earlier on regarding my wife was a carer for a private provider, and they're getting 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go into a house. My wife couldn't do that. She spent, and a lot of the carers will be the same, spend their own time to make sure that the people who they're looking after has the service that they really deserve. And I totally agree when we were clapping for the nurses. These carers went over and above when through the full pandemic and continue to do so. It's a job that is necessary, but for my wife it was a job that there was satisfaction at the end of it when she was able to help the people who she was looking after. So thanks.
Thanks, Convener. It's just a very brief comment. Of course, we welcome, I think there are changing attitudes, as Patricia alluded to there, that social care staff are beginning to get the recognition that they rightly deserve, because there ultimately won't be any recovery within the NHS until there's recovery within social care. And I think that there is a recognition of that now, and the need and the necessity for good quality social care. So yeah, we thank everybody involved for all the work that they do, and we welcome the increase to £12, but we look forward to hopefully in the future welcoming a minimum of £15. So hopefully it won't be too long before we're back here again discussing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We will now be moving into private session, so I'll just ask if we can stop the live stream. Okay, can I now ask everyone online